A remote clifftop. A fatal fall. Dez Campbell's wife is dead. He claimed it was a tragic accident.
I didn't do anything.
But this was cold-blooded murder.
I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever that he pushed her off the cliff.
The conniving gold digger,
Very selfish, cold, nasty person.
who only married for one thing: money.
He just got cocky.
And she preyed on lonely men,
Very cold, callous, calculating, completely motivated by greed.
men looking for love.
He was a good person. It's very easy to like.
But for George Marcetta,
It's alleged that you placed the drug in George Marcetta's food that evening.
That's an accusation and a half, if anything, is an accusation.
there was no happy ever after. Hello, I'm Layla McKinnon. Welcome to Inside Story. They were lonely people looking for love, the perfect targets for the despicable predators you'll meet tonight. Gold diggers who weaseled their way into the hearts and bank accounts of two unsuspecting, vulnerable people. It wasn't the first time they'd done it, but they just got greedier and greedier. They wanted it all, and to get it, they had to kill. It was the most unlikely place to go camping, perched on the edge of a 54-metre cliff. But Dez Campbell didn't come here for the scenery. He came here to murder his new wife, Janet.
The story was that she had slipped and fallen over the cliff. Did you believe that for a while?
No.
No, never, no.
Did you have anything to do with the death of Janet?
I did. I was my idea to fucking go camping. But I didn't do anything.
As we'll see tonight, police didn't believe a word of Campbell's pathetic act. But this ruthless bloodsucker was free to prey on unsuspecting women for another 3 years.
His first question was, what's your portfolio? How much you got in shares? How much you got in this and that?
Dez Campbell was a serial womaniser. He'd already been married twice when he met Janet Ficaro, and he had dumped yet another woman before they even made it to the altar. Then there were countless flings and dalliances. But when Campbell met Janet Ficaro, he knew he was on a winner.
Janet was a lovely lady, but she did not seem the type that Dez would be attracted to.
But Janet was exactly what Dez was looking for, a naive, unworldly, wealthy farm widow looking for love. Dez stood to gain more than $500,000. All he had to do was woo her, marry her, get her to change her will and murder her.
I always thought that he was going to hurt her.
No, I just thought he'd rip her off. I just knew he was after her money.
But Dez had greatly underestimated one obstacle: Janet's loving family, who saw him for what he really was, a cruel, philandering gold digger.
Bloody family were interfering pricks in their marriage.
Just from the beginning, I just didn't like him. First thing I thought is he just didn't seem Jenny's type.
All he wanted to do was rip her off, and you could see it a mile away.
Also tonight, Vicky Aphandis, the hired help who stole the heart of an older man, then murdered him so she could steal his money.
What is your reason for murdering George Marcetta?
I won't comment because I didn't do it.
I put it to you that as a
Who's
result...
making all these allegations?
Me.
Oh.
Just like Dez Campbell, it wasn't the first time Vicky Aphandis had preyed on the vulnerable. But this time, she was determined to get everything. And the trusting George Marcetta happily allowed Vicky to take control of every aspect of his life.
From all accounts, George was head over heels in love with Vicky, and he would do anything for her. He just did whatever she wanted.
What Aphandis really wanted was to get rid of George Marcetta and keep his house, his money and his business, to quite literally take him to the cleaners. One evening, she drugged his meal, poured kerosene around the house he had already signed over to her, then set it alight.
It's alleged that you placed the drug in George Marcetta's food that evening. What do you say to that?
That I placed... Oh... why would I? Oh, no. Why would I want to do that? No comment. Jesus, that's an accusation and a half, if anything is an accusation.
She was such a good con woman that on the day we interviewed her, I had a policewoman escort her around and be with her for the day. And at the end of the day, after I'd finished my interviews, she said, "Look, you've got the wrong person. This woman's beautiful. She's a lovely lady."
But first, Dez Campbell, the former paratrooper who pushed his wife Janet over a cliff so he could claim her fortune. They'd only been married 6 months when Janet plunged to her death. Dez claimed it was a tragic accident, that she must have fallen after leaving the tent to go to the toilet.
And I heard what sounded like a almost like a sigh, and I think I said, "What the f*** have you done now?" And there was no reply.
And the story that Janet had got up in the night to go to the bathroom and tumbled over the edge, well, what did the site tell you about that?
Well, the tent was pitched facing, obviously facing the water. It was very easy to see that there was a cliff in front of you, so I can't think of any circumstances where you would leave that tent knowing there's a cliff there and accidentally fall off.
So the story didn't ring true from the word go?
Oh, not at all.
Deniliquin, country New South Wales. It was known as the ute capital of the world until paramedic Dez Campbell put it on the map for something far more sinister. It was here at work that Dez found the perfect victim, hospital assistant and wealthy widow Janet. Ever the predator, Dez moved in. But this time he would leave no loose ends. He would marry and murder her. How would you describe Jenny?
Friendly, thoughtful. And she was so harmless. She wouldn't hurt a fly. She was just there to do anything for anyone.
Mary Marshall and Therese Rourke tried to warn their sister off the money-grabbing predator, but she wouldn't be swayed. Janet, or Jenny as they called her, was smitten.
He's obviously said the right things, pushed the right buttons, done all of that she just became... She was infatuated by him. She was, you know, to Jenny, she was in love and she'd found her new man.
How would you describe your relationship with each other?
Good.
Yeah. Have you ever had any marital problems?
Oh, no more than a couple of angry words. I suppose that's about it. Yeah.
But Dez Campbell despised Janet and spoke of her in cruel and disparaging terms, even after he married her.
Well, he just said that she was a fat, ugly pig and she won't leave him alone and that sort of thing.
So as if she was just some woman who was obsessed with him?
Yeah, that's right.
When in fact she was his wife?
That's correct.
Initially, came across as quite a nice guy. Competent in his job, you know, friendly. Then he started to sort of show some stranger attitudes.
Bob Crampton was Campbell's boss at the local ambulance station.
I had no doubt that Dez would end up with every penny that Janet had. You know, I never thought, you know, there'd be murder involved, but as soon as I heard that it happened, I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever that he'd pushed her off the cliff.
Coming up on Inside Story, Dez Campbell's dark past.
They'd often pull different races over and just make up infractions. They picked the people that wouldn't complain.
Dez Campbell was hardly a great catch. He had little money and an extremely shady past. Janet Ficaro had no idea what she was getting herself into when the widower met the smooth-talking paramedic.
You mentioned to me before that you served as a police officer?
Yes, I was in the Victoria Police and the British Police.
Before becoming a paramedic, Campbell was a police officer for almost 12 years, both in Australia and the UK. But it was hardly a distinguished career. He was thrown out of Victoria Police in the mid-90s after admitting to bashing confessions out of suspects and planting false evidence.
You know, tell us about his time in the police force. They'd often pull different races over and just make up infractions. and issue them, and he said they'd sort of pick their mark so that they picked the people that wouldn't complain.
After being sacked by Victoria Police, Campbell joined the British police force, but returned home in disgrace after just 3 years. He had attacked an innocent man with pepper spray and was facing allegations of sexual assault. While in England, Dez had an affair with June Ingham. She left her husband and came to Australia to be with him. But when she told Dez her divorce settlement was just $45,000, he was furious. He called her a slag and a liar, and he drove her to the airport and left her.
And did they get back together?
Yeah, the following day he thought about it and rang her, and they made up, and he asked if she'd buy a new sports car, a Lotus Esprit, for $60,000.
And she did?
She did.
The couple got engaged and bought a house in Deniliquin with June's money. Campbell suggested the house be in his name, as June wasn't a resident. After 9 months, she returned to England to pack up her life and ship her belongings to Australia, ready to become the new Mrs. Dez Campbell.
He told us when she went back to England that she was spending hugely on his credit cards, and he basically rang her up and told her, you know, it was all over.
In fact, Dez broke up with June by text, saying, "I'm sorry, but I am moving to live with ex-wife. We'll sell house and send you money. Post me address for your things to be sent to you. Have made up my mind to do this."
We were sort of a bit taken back when we found out the truth later, that it was actually him that had bled her dry.
Campbell returned one photo album and refused further contact with June. As for paying her back, he gave her a measly $9,000, but only after June took him to court. Meanwhile, the serial sleazebag continued to pursue women online.
He was an absolutely beautiful man. He just absolutely amazed me. He was just a really, really good man.
Janet Aldred was just one of several women Dez Campbell met online.
When I very first met him, we had the candles and all that sort of stuff. He wasn't into going to the pub and drinking beer with the other yobbos that drink with two hands, and that was exactly how I saw him.
So he was romantic?
Oh, extremely. We sat and we watched music videos. The first one we watched was George Michael.
What were you there for?
Sex. To be perfectly blunt and to be perfectly honest, the only reason I was there was for company and sex.
And you never saw a bad side to him?
Never.
Dez Campbell met Janet Ficaro in 2000 at the Deniliquin Hospital, where she worked as an orderly. They began dating in 2003, and from the start, Mary Marshall and Therese Rourke were wary of their sister's new man. Janet was normally very chatty, often oversharing information, yet she hardly talked about Dez. And when they finally decided to marry, the secretive couple told nobody except the celebrant.
He's the one who wanted it to be a secret because it was so much not our sister to keep anything a secret like that. She wasn't good at keeping secrets.
He really didn't want the world knowing that he was going out with Jenny, because she wasn't really the type of person that he would normally choose to go out with.
Echuca. This is where Dez Campbell and Janet Ficaro were married. It's only an hour's drive from Deniliquin, but that was far enough away to keep the wedding a total secret.
I turned up to conduct the wedding, and there was Dez, Janet and myself. The owner of the River Gallery Inn was asked to be a witness and her accountant, and yet Dez had ordered from a local deli platters and platters of food. And he had bottles and bottles of French champagne. It was like he was trying to impress us, the people, you know, that were at the wedding, but we were just hired help and bystanders.
Jennifer Whelan was the marriage celebrant at Dez and Janet's wedding in September 2004.
It was a great wedding. It was beautiful. Janet was happy. She looked gorgeous. Dez had gone to a lot of trouble and a lot of expense, but it was also weird.
What was weird?
There were no cameras, no photographs.
Had you ever been to a wedding before where photos weren't taken?
No.
This was an absolute first.
Yes.
Just as weird was Dez Campbell's insistence Janet couldn't have any family, even her son Stephen, at the wedding. But she was so besotted she would agree to do anything to keep her man happy.
I said, oh, so when are you going to tell the family? When are you going to break it to Stephen that you're married? And she just looked so sad that I didn't continue.
By now, Dez Campbell had total control over Janet. He convinced her to buy a $650,000 house 8 hours away from Deniliquin at a coastal hamlet called Otford. It was to be their marital home. But Campbell was restless. While Janet wound up her affairs in the bush, he moved to Otford alone, using the bush hideaway to entertain other women.
You stayed with Dez at the home
Otford.
in Otford.
Yes.
Can you remember what he told you about his new home?
He said that he'd bought it. He showed me the real estate magazines and all that sort of stuff, and it was a absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous place.
Did he ever mention Janet?
No.
Dez Campbell's plan to murder his wife, Janet, was about to become a reality. Finally, she was moving up from Deniliquin to enjoy married life with her new husband in their new home. Or so she thought.
I left his house 3 days before she moved over into the new house. 3 days after that, she was dead. I figure if I'd have parted money to him, maybe I would have been the one at the bottom of that cliff.
Coming up on Inside Story, a family's fears
Mum said he will do something. This is where he'll do something to her.
as the killer strikes. In September 2004, Dez Campbell married Janet Ficaro. Not long after, she rewrote her will, adding her husband as a major beneficiary. It was an act of trust and love that sealed Janet's fate. All Dez had to do now was kill her. And as long as he made it look like an accident, he could rightfully claim Janet's fortune.
Did he target your sister for her money?
Yes,
From the beginning?
I'd say from the beginning.
For 6 months, the newlyweds lived separately. But now Janet was leaving Deniliquin to live with Dez just south of Sydney in the $650,000 house she had paid for.
As I ran into Janet in the supermarket just a couple of days before she left for Helensburgh, was very excited. In fact, it was the most excited and happy that I'd ever seen Janet in my life.
But within a week, Janet would be dead. A few days after arriving at their new home, Janet rang her mum, saying she and Dez were going camping for a night at the nearby Royal National Park. Janet's mum, who has since passed away, suspected the worst.
Oh, Mum was really upset because Mum said he will do something. This is where he'll do something to her. I know he's going to do something.
It was Easter 2005, and Dez had been planning this camping trip for months. They could have stayed at a campsite just 1 kilometre away. They could have parked an hour's walk from here. Instead, Dez made Janet traipse through the Royal National Park for more than 3 hours, knowing she would be tired and making it seem like he was doing her a favour by pitching their tent right here.
What made you decide to go and camp here this time?
Well, I was going to go to Burning Palms or somewhere up there, but Janet was sort of complaining all the time about being tired.
Did she like to go camping?
Had never been camping in her life, hated it.
So it was out of character for her to go camping?
She wasn't an active person, a sporty person, so not only did she go camping, but she went hiking for 3 hours to get to her campsite, which didn't make any sense at all either.
No.
The suspicions and fears of Janet's family were well founded. Within hours, she was at the bottom of the cliff, dead.
Did you have anything to do with the death of Janet?
I did. I was my idea to fucking go camping. But I didn't do anything about what you mean, you know.
Dez claimed Janet left their tent at dusk to go to the toilet, and she must have slipped and fallen over the edge of the 54-metre cliff.
I remember going over to the edge as far as I could at a couple of spots and trying to look, but I couldn't see anything. I went back to my backpack. That's where I had my torch.
Did you make an assessment of her injuries when you first?
I could tell she was dead.
Dez Campbell's callous behaviour that night and in the following weeks astounded everyone, especially Janet's grieving family.
It was only when he was at the hospital they asked if there was anyone else that should be contacted that he said, oh, well, she has got a son.
In Deniliquin.
Somewhere.
And to this day, he still hasn't told us, has he? Des has never actually said anything, never contacted the family, has never spoken to us, nothing. Not even a card or a letter or any acknowledgement at all.
It's not the behaviour of an innocent person.
Certainly isn't, no.
Do you believe that Janet may have taken her own life?
No. No, she wouldn't have taken her life.
I'm sorry to ask you that question.
But police weren't buying Dez Campbell's sob story, and it seemed there was only one person who believed he was innocent, his lover, Janet Aldred.
When the police told you that Dez had murdered his wife, why didn't you believe them?
For starters, because I didn't believe that he was married. That was the whole thing. I had this thing in my head that you mustn't have the same man because Dez is not married.
And did you then think, oh, well, he might be married, but he wouldn't murder anybody?
Well, I'm thinking, you know, he's a man that goes out and saves people's lives. He's a paramedic. How can a paramedic go out and kill people?
Does she have any savings that you know of?
Oh, well, she would have had some super, I suppose, 30 or 40,000, probably.
At what point did police first start to suspect Dez?
Well, obviously there was some suspicions just upon attending the scene of where it occurred and where they'd pitched the tent. But I think as we dug deeper and deeper into his past and the way he continued into the future after Janet's death, it was highly suspicious.
But despite the suspicions of police, Dez Campbell seemed remarkably unfazed. Immediately after murdering Janet, Campbell made inquiries about her will and looked into selling the Otford house. He also went on holiday with another woman, claiming she was his wife.
How did you feel about that?
Oh, well, we actually thought it was just a big joke. We thought, what an idiot, you know, what's he trying to prove, you know? If you're going to murder your wife, you could at least pretend of some sort of innocence.
Dez Campbell didn't let up. He was cagey, cold and uncooperative. It wasn't until 2 years after Janet Campbell's death, a coronial inquest was finally held to establish whether her husband should face trial for murder. Cocky as ever, the killer struck a pose for the waiting media, while his new Filipino wife, Melissa, wife number 4, was about to receive the shock of her life. Not only did her husband have a third wife named Janet, he was a suspect in her death.
What had Dez told his fourth wife about Janet?
Nothing.
She didn't know anything about her?
No.
So she didn't know how she died?
No, she wasn't aware of the circumstances on how Janet had died or what the relationship was.
Even though the police case was based entirely on circumstantial evidence, the coroner recommended that Dez Campbell should stand trial. And in May 2010, the philandering gold digger was finally convicted of murdering Janet 6 years after he pushed her off the remote clifftop south of Sydney. Janet's family was ecstatic. This was the news they'd been waiting for. As they celebrated, Campbell was led away to serve his sentence, 33 years with a non-parole period of 24 years.
Were you concerned he would get away with murder?
Oh, for sure, for sure. You know, no one saw him do it. Everything was circumstantial, but there was so much evidence that, you know, It wasn't until they said guilty that we were actually relieved.
Still to come on Inside Story, the hired help
Doing the washing, cleaning, everything.
turns homicidal.
She came across as a very kind, nice lady, but deep down she's really just a callous, cold-hearted killer.
The evil housekeeper who thought she'd clean up. Vicky Aphandis was a real piece of work, cunning and ruthless. But she could be charming, and she used her charm well, worming her way into the lives of trusting people she cheated without hesitation. It was all pretty small time, but when Aphandis met successful divorcee George Marcetta, she knew she had hit pay dirt. Soon, the manipulative housekeeper had stolen Marcetta's heart and taken control of his business. But that wasn't all she would take. Vicky Aphandis portrayed herself as a kind, caring person. But she was a self-absorbed gold digger, a ruthless opportunist who preyed on older, lonely men. To Vicky, they were merely a source of income. It was all about the money. And to get it, she was even willing to murder.
She came across as a very kind, nice lady, but deep down she's really just a callous, cold-hearted killer. She was very money-hungry all the time, very business-like in all of her dealings with people. She didn't really care about any person. She just sort of, everything she did had a purpose.
Vicky had already milked two older men of their hard-earned savings when she met George Marcetta. George was in his mid-50s and ran a successful painting company when he employed 44-year-old Aphandis to cook and clean for him.
I was going there, doing the washing, cleaning, everything, because someone, like men don't do everything,
Vicky was also claiming a disability pension, supposedly unable to work after a number of car accidents. But she had done her homework on George, and this was an opportunity she couldn't miss.
So before she even began a relationship, she had inquired
She had
about what he
researched him,
had.
yeah. She actually went and visited his ex-wife and done a lot of research on him about his financial position and who had claim to his assets if she was to do something with him. They were actual words to the ex-wife.
Vicky soon took control of George's entire life, and no longer was she simply the hired help.
Was it a sexual relationship?
Yes.
Or it was?
Well, it was sexual, it was business. But we were just like a couple.
Was he happy to have a new girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. He was actually showing off with her photo on his mobile.
Do you think he was in love with her?
Yeah, yeah. He never actually spoke about anybody like he was talking about Vicky at the time. I reckon he really loved that woman.
Shopfitter Predrag Mikic met George Marcetta through work. Both born in Serbia, the men formed a solid bond. Predrag was surprised George fell for such a bossy woman, but was glad his friend of 15 years was happy.
He was a good person. It's very, I reckon, very easy to like. It was very funny.
Bit of a prankster.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but he was a, like sort of big man, like a, like a teddy bear, but deep down, soft like a cotton.
And that was just how Vicky Aphandis liked her men. Soft, easily manipulated. Before George Marcetta, she'd fleeced two other vulnerable divorcees.
She had 3 ex-partners, all by the name of George. We'll call them George 1, 2 and 3 to make it easier. George 1, she fell pregnant to him very quickly, and then soon after the baby was born, she left him and went on with George number 2.
So she had a daughter to George number 1 who paid child support, but he was never really certain that he was the father?
No, he approached Vicky and asked for a DNA test to prove that, or disprove that he was the father, and she wouldn't allow it to happen.
When George number 1 refused to pay Vicky's daughter's school fees, he didn't hear from her again.
George number 2 took on the role as the father.
George number 2 took on the role from basically the moment the child was born, and look, it's possible that he was the father, we don't know.
George number 2 is taxi driver George Lakisiotis. Vicky took up with him in 1985, and they've had an on-off, mostly on relationship to this day.
But when you met George Marcetta, you were still in a relationship with George Marcetta, a taxi driver.
When I met George Marcetta, I was not in a relationship with George Marcetta. I was finishing a relationship with George Marcetta.
George Marcetta may have been George number 3, but George Marcetta, the taxi driver, was far from gone. Even though he'd paid Vicky a settlement of $120,000, he was still seeing her on the sly. But she said she'd soon be back to look after him, and with all of George Marcetta's money. And within a couple of short years, Vicky Aphandis had persuaded George Marcetta to sign over all his major assets, even his beloved Jaguar.
When Vicky met George, he had a house in Dandenong. Vicky convinced George to sell that house and move over closer to where she was.
Did they live together?
They never lived together. Vicky convinced George to buy this house over in Belfield, which is a short distance from where she lived in Ivanhoe.
The couple bought George's new Belfield house together. He contributed $100,000 and Vicky $80,000. But she demanded the house be solely in her name.
He told me that she insists the house to be under her name. I mean, if you're planning to live with somebody, I can't understand why.
Vicky Aphandis had the house, and now she took control of George's business. She convinced him to shut down his existing company, Universe Painting Services, and reopen it as Universal High Tech. Vicky was appointed co-director and her teenage daughter company secretary.
It was not my idea, that was his, that were you, if he was around to tell you, it's not my idea at all. He wanted to just change the name. He wanted me to be in the business.
In what capacity?
As his partner, as his, like, he wanted me to be in the business. How can I say it to you?
What was your official title in the business?
He was director and I was director. That's it.
But Vicky wasn't interested in building a future with George Marcetta. She wanted to kill him and take over his estate. So she decided to drug him and set fire to the Belfield house with George inside. Then the insurance money would be all hers. But there was one final hurdle. She had to get George to cancel his will, which left his estate to his daughter, Athanasia.
Put it to you that you convinced George Marcetta to cancel his last will and testament, of which George Marcetta's daughter was the sole beneficiary. What do you say to that?
That I told him to cancel? No.
And why did that occur?
George had a fight with his daughter. They weren't talking.
George had a fantastic relationship with his daughter. His daughter's a lovely, gentle person, as George was. He was a very happy, gentle person.
So Vicky fabricated a family rift between George and his daughter.
It was all to do with this will. She wanted him to cancel his will.
Next on Inside Story, how Vicky's shocking crime comes unstuck.
No one had told you that there was a deceased person in the house. You were saying that Ivan Bassett has murdered George Marcetta. What do you say to that?
George Marcetta was a marked man. His scheming lover, Vicky Aphandis, had taken control of his assets, of his entire life. Now all she had to do was kill him and she'd inherit the lot. But first Vicky needed a fall guy, and that fall guy was one of George's friends, Ivan Bassett.
You did make a report to police, is that correct? In relation to a burglary.
Vicky tried to frame Bassett to make out there was bad blood between him and George by staging a fake robbery at George's house, then blaming his mate.
Do you agree that that burglary did not in fact occur?
No, I didn't say that.
No, I'm asking.
That the burglary didn't occur.
She said that she'd seen Ivan Bassett driving away with a trailer full of George Marcetta's tools, and she'd actually physically seen him leave the crime scene.
Having cast suspicion on Ivan Bassett, Vicky put her plan to murder George into action. On the 8th of September 2004, she tidied up the house, then cooked George his favourite meal, pork rolls and noodles, heavily lacing it with the sedative Serapax.
The post-mortem results indicate that George Marcetta ingested this drug with his last meal. Do you have any comment to make about that?
His last meal? How would he do that? How would he do that?
Vicky later told police she went home after cooking the meal and texted George goodnight.
She claimed that after he replied, she went to bed at about 11:30. But she was lying. She was actually at George's home and she sent and received both text messages. George was incapable of anything. He was in bed, unconscious. Vicky now prepared to burn him alive.
Clean, but I put it to you that in preparation to burn the house and murder George Marcetta, you've spread newspaper throughout the floor. What do you say to that?
I'm not going to comment on accusations like that. No, I'm not going to comment. If I didn't do something like that, Jesus. No.
Well, did you do that?
No, I deny.
Vicky then drove home and got into bed. At about 3 a.m, she received a call from one of George's neighbours and returned to the burning house. Vicky told police at the scene that George's mate Ivan had murdered him. It was a monumental mistake.
No one had told you that there was a deceased person in the house at that time when you were saying that Ivan Bassett has murdered George Marcetta. What do you say to that?
I don't understand it. I don't understand.
Well, why would you be saying that Ivan Bassett killed George Marcetta before anyone's actually told you that there was a body in the house?
Early the next morning, George's best mate, Predrag Mikic, received a call from Vicky telling him the house had burnt down.
She goes, George is gone. I said, where did he go? She goes, he died. I was just trying to picture George in that moment because I was very close to him.
When did you next talk to Vicky?
The very same day she called the meeting.
So the same day that George had died,
That's
she called
correct.
a meeting about
Yeah.
business?
Yes.
Vicky's lack of emotion was deeply unsettling. Even at George's funeral, she didn't appear to be upset.
My impressions were that she was just a very calculated, cold-hearted, evil person. She just showed no remorse or no compassion for anyone.
But while police found Vicky's behaviour highly suspicious, there was one crucial detail that had them stumped. A neighbour had spotted a late model Ford Falcon in George's driveway on the night of the fire. They needed to find the owner of that car.
And we just door-knocked every car hire company within a massive radius and come across it.
Police finally found the mystery car here. Vicky, who had access to 3 other cars, had secretly hired it 2 days before the murder and returned it just hours after the fire. She even asked the attendant to rip up the rental agreement. Fortunately, they didn't, and it was to be another damning piece of evidence against Vicky Aphandis.
No other person, other than yourself, was aware that you had possession of that hire car from your car. What do you say to that?
No one was aware.
Nobody else was aware.
What difference? What does that? What does that mean? What does it make? Does it make? Do I have to advertise the fact that I'm hiring a car if something gets broken down? I mean, do you have to do that? I don't understand. I don't understand. I didn't conceal it. It was in the driveway.
The police now had a strong case against Vicky Aphandis. Detectives charged her with George Marcetta's murder. And while Vicky was in prison awaiting trial, there was another breakthrough. She confessed to fellow prisoners.
I knew nothing about the murder. I don't read newspapers. I never saw anything on television. What I know came from Vicky's mouth.
Anne was Vicky's cellmate at the Dame Phyllis Frost Correctional Centre, and her evidence would prove crucial at the trial.
I says, well, did you do it? And she hesitated and she says, well, we done it. It was all arranged. I tried not to show her my shock, my face, because I'm thinking, my God, I'm sleeping next to a murderer.
With Anne's new evidence and a compelling circumstantial case, Vicky Aphandis was found guilty of George Marcetta's murder. She was sentenced to 24 years with a non-parole period of 20 years.
Today, justice was served for my father. He was a good man, very hardworking, loved and respected by all his family.
I've never met anyone like Vicky Aphandis in my life, never. She's evil. She's not someone that can do that to a nice man, because I've been told that he's a lovely man, is not a human being. And for money, shocking. The lust for money, greed, terrible. She's where she belongs.
Coming up on Inside Story, a family remembers...
Beautiful, innocent person that didn't deserve anything that happened to her in the end.
...as others try to forget.
He's a murderer. He's a nasty, nasty man.
Vicky Aphandis never showed any remorse for killing her partner, George Marcetta. In fact, she steadfastly denied she had anything to do with it.
And in killing George Marcetta, I used to gain all of his assets. The house at 140 Liberty Parade, the business of Universe High-Tech Construction and Interior, and other chattels and possessions of George Marcetta. What do you say to that?
I won't comment, really, I won't comment.
What is your reason for murdering George Marcetta?
I won't comment because I didn't do it.
She wasn't owning up to the police, but Vicky did confess to fellow prisoners as she awaited trial. Crucial evidence that finally saw her locked away for at least 20 years. Vicky's big mouth had helped get her arrested. And even here at the Dame Phyllis Frost Correctional Centre, she kept on talking, confessing to a fellow inmate that she'd been trying out drugs on George for months and saying that 3 people had planned the murder.
She told me that she was sick of people, George lending money to other people, and it was all about Vicky. And control and arrogance, very arrogant. It had to be her way or the highway.
Did you see her cry?
No, to be honest, no.
You never saw her cry once?
No, honest to God, no.
Just how many people fell victim to Vicky Aphandis, she's not saying. But during her trial, police gave evidence about the suspicious deaths of several elderly people in her care.
I would describe her, from my knowledge of her, being very callous, cold, calculated, manipulative, and just completely driven by greed.
How do you think she felt about George Marcetta?
I think George Marcetta was just a cash cow to her.
But George loved her?
George loved her, yes. And she abused that love.
While Vicky Aphandis languishes in a Victorian prison, Dez Campbell is serving his sentence at Goulburn's forbidding maximum security jail. Just desserts for the man who pushed his wife off a 54-metre cliff.
We spent years trying to get the answer we wanted, that he was guilty, that he was going to spend his life in jail, and that helped with not making it okay, but getting my sister justice, the justice she deserved. And hopefully it's helped all those women out there be safe from this man, or he would just be out there doing it again.
Still doing it, yep.
To another woman.
Dez Campbell hasn't been idle in prison. He's vigorously protested his innocence to anybody who'll listen. And just last year, he appealed his conviction and lost.
She was meant to start her new life, but her new life lasted less than a week. So, if only you'd turn back time where she never met Dez, be a whole different story. But he would have found someone else anyway and done the same, because that's just the sort of person he is. So, evil and vicious.
And even those who'd been dazzled by the con man in the past now see Dez Campbell for who he truly is.
Now you know what you know about Dez Campbell. What do you think of him?
He's a murderer. There's no two ways about it. He killed his wife. He took an awful lot of women for a ride. He took a lot of women for their money. He conned them big time. He's a nasty, nasty man. And he's where he should be now.